Unashamed and Afraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing, where we share real recovery stories, learn from experts, and share resources that actually work. So join us in being unashamed and unafraid.
I'm back with mental health counselor, podcaster, and speaker Stephen Shields from Unashamed, Unafraid. In part one, you got to hear Stephen's personal story of recovery from sex addiction and 7 critical things to know about healing and recovery, including how to start, whether you're dealing with your own behavior or that of a loved one. And we're diving right back into that today, but with an extra focus on parents. These are universal principles. Stephen still got some amazing stuff in here for anyone struggling personally or as a spouse or so forth. So stick around even if you're not a parent. That's just where we're starting, because a lot of these exercises in building supportive communities and dispelling shame are especially relevant in our homes. If you've ever found yourself dreading a conversation about pornography or inappropriate sexual behavior and thought, well, I don't know how to talk about this, or I think I said the wrong thing, or even that conversation went totally wrong, I blew it. Well, this episode is going to equip you with exactly what to say, as well as how to safeguard your own emotional well-being. You may remember our conversation in episode 1 about labels, why it's so important to avoid identifying people by a thing that they experience. Stephen mentioned how a lot of the language most of us use around this tends to be informed by shame, but there are easy ways to make it so much better. And this is the first one. Always acknowledge that this issue, pornography use, compulsive sexual behavior, sex addiction, it's in the room. We're not talking about some faraway issue. We're talking about something that intimately affects just about everyone. And it matters that we refer to it this way out loud. Stephen demonstrated the difference it makes to talk about it like this, comparing the language people might use at church.
The one thing we can do is stop talking about everyone who's not in this room or talking about people as if they're not in this room. Because whatever population you think you're talking about, they're in this room. So that's the first thing, is to don't be like, hey, I know there's people out there that might be cheating on their spouse, or, I know those are those teenagers who are looking at porn, and, that's not our youth in this congregation because we're one of the good ones. But, there are people out there struggling. What we need to tell them.
But you may meet one of these people one day.
You may meet one of them one day or whatever. Yeah. So stop talking about it like it's not in the room, particularly around the issue of pornography and all of that. For the youth, what I can tell you is they for sure, no matter what you think you did, have seen it. So if you're under the narrative that they don't know what it is and have not seen it, you're fooling yourself.
Jumping in here for a minute, I am old enough to recognize that this isn't a conversation my parents would have had. I remember years ago as a young mom learning about the statistics about what age my small children would be exposed to pornography, statistically. And it was shocking. I mean, we weren't used to this reality. We were all trying to catch up as it was happening. We are the first generation to live in this kind of reality without being able to reference history. Our parents and grandparents, we didn't have a lot of data there because it was new. So we need to give ourselves some grace when we talk about the realities of this sensitive subject. But long gone are the days when we can avoid it and not talk about it. Knowledge is power, so I'm going to add some numbers to what Stephen is saying. When we say it's in the room, or teenagers, youths, they've seen porn, they consume porn, this is no hyperbole here. Common Sense Media did a study just a few years ago among teenagers and found that 73% of them have consumed pornography. 41% of them reported viewing it during the school day, and 54% are first exposed to pornography when they were 13 or younger. The average age is 12, and nearly half are viewing it intentionally on a regular basis. I'll put an asterisk on intentional, because compulsion plays a big part in this. But the point is, if you're going to make an assumption, assume it's everyone and it's always in the room. Thinking about it that way, talking about it that way, is the only way to start making our communities, including church environments and our homes, a safe place for honesty and healing. And as Stephen's about to mention, this is a good practice for any taboo topic. We set the culture by compassionately addressing it as being in the room.
It is so pervasive to have the audacity in my mind, with the amount of data we have right now, to think that you are standing anywhere in a church setting and you are not in front of someone who has undisclosed sexual compulsive behavior that they're ashamed about, you are a fool. Like, there's just no way they're not there. And so
It's the reality that
it's the reality. Yeah. So don't
Not even
talk about
debatable.
it. It's not even debatable. And so that's where I'd say is like, talk about it as if they're in the room. And so whether that is LGBTQ, whether that is sexual addiction, whether it's grief, right? Whether it's financial problems, that's just across the board. And then just stop labeling people. Like what we said about addicts. Like, don't label people as the lazy ones in your congregation. Don't label people as the drama one in your congregation, right? Because if I'm in your church congregation, Lisa, and every time we're around and I'm like, oh, that's Lisa with the podcast, and blah, blah, blah. She thinks she's a big deal or whatever. By the way, I don't actually even know you. I'm just deciding out of my insecurity to say that, right? So out of my insecurity, I decide to say that.
One thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if that is the perception and how everyone decides to label and talk about you, how are they ever going to have the human experience of connecting with you? So, for example, some of the stuff that I've been shamed with in my life is I have been compared to child predators, perpetrators, because if it's sexual sin, throw it all in the bag, right? And like, that's just so hurtful to people. Like, my family was littered with childhood sexual abuse. It destroyed my family of origin. So even in full-blown addiction, even when I was sick as I was going to get, I would never in a million years have done child porn with a child. That's not my trauma. That's not my thing. And so when you lump those all together, ouch, if you're me, right? And so talk about it like it's in the room, right? And then when we're talking to family members, assume you don't have the whole story.
I love this conversation about assumptions, and Stephen's about to break down another critical assumption everyone should make. And this gets a little more personal. When you learn that someone you love is struggling with sexual addiction or compulsion as a spouse, friend, or parent, assume that you don't have the whole story. Stephen's going to explain how this safeguards your emotional health as you navigate the new role of supporting someone in their struggle.
So typically what happens when it comes out is people are either discovered, so they're caught. I see my teenager's phone and I'm like, whoa, okay, guess we need to have a conversation now, right? I go to his past and I'm like, hey, so we're 13-year-old and, what do we do, right? And so there's either a discovery that happens, right? Or there's a disclosure, where they come in, head hanging down, hey, Dad, we talked about porn on Sunday and, yeah, right. And so no matter how it comes to light, assume you don't have the whole story. Because when we're ashamed about something, like if I catch you in a lie, Lisa, or something, like the odds of you being like, oh, Stephen, here's the full truth right here. That's just really hard to do in human nature with shame. And so, we can look at the story of Adam and Eve, right? Like, it's just like hard for them to get real straightforward. It took a minute, and it's like, because when we're ashamed about stuff, it's hard to own it. It's hard to not attach it to our identity. And so going investigator mode is like the number one way to blow it. So if I'm a parent, if I'm a partner, turning on the full investigation mode, there's a difference between creating safety for myself. So yeah, if my partner's having an affair or having a bunch of affairs, like I may not want to have sex with them until there's like an STD panel. That's safety. That's great. I may not want to be sleeping in the same room as you. Absolutely create the safety. That's different than tell me everything. It doesn't work. And so it's really easy to say, hey, teenage kid, let's go get an ice cream cone. Love you. P.S. Totally saw the porn on your phone. So that's probably something we should talk about. And we don't have to talk about it all right now. And you don't have to tell me everything.
This is such an interesting point. To be clear, Stephen is not saying you have to ignore, dismiss, or downplay the problem. But he is saying that it's good for everyone involved if we pace ourselves. If this is a situation with a partner, honor your physical and emotional need for safety. Do that first, even if you're not ready to talk about it yet. And when you are ready to bring it up, whether it's a partner or a child, resist the urge to go investigator mode. Introduce the topic and that a future conversation is needed. Hey, I saw this. We're going to talk about it. And then give yourself and everyone else a chance to digest.
because
That is like
I know how
the
shame
antithesis
works.
to how I would want to talk to
For
a
sure,
teenager.
for sure. And that's where I'd say, are you managing your feelings or theirs? So are you trying to show up in your role as a parent to take care of your child, or are you trying to make sure that your child is performing so
I think
you
in
feel
the
okay
moment
as a
you
parent?
don't know.
Yeah, oh yeah,
right?
it's activating for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, so when you can, show up well, get the community support you need,
Right.
as
You
a
process
parent.
that with your friends. You
For
don't
sure.
process that with your
For
kids.
sure.
For sure.
For sure. And so then I say, hey, right, or even with a partner, like, hey, I saw the text with the woman in your yoga class and it's super inappropriate and bad. You don't have to tell me everything right now, but we are going to need to talk about this and figure it out. And this is what I need right now for safety, but I want to figure this out. I want to talk about this. So let's figure out how we're going to talk about it.
This little bit of wisdom is such a powerful tool in starting difficult conversations. Assume you don't know everything. Belay the impulse which wants to demand to know everything, and know that you don't have to talk about it all at once. You can create safety without having to resolve this in a single conversation.
If you sit with your teenager and say, hey, you don't have to tell me all of it right now. I love you. And we'll talk about this in the way that you need to talk about it. And I don't take away their phone that second and ground them, because they can get to it anyways, by the way. And, hey, but let's talk about this. And I'm okay if there's more. So I just need to know, is there more? What's going on? Is there stuff we need to talk about? And we don't have to talk about it right now over this ice cream cone. We can wrap this conversation right now, go back to talking about the Olympics and, move on. And yeah, there's more. Okay, great. I want you to know I'm supporting you and I'm here. You've now given the Lord such an ability to work on that person that's kind, that's hopeful, that's invitational, to bring them out of their shame so that you actually get the whole story. So I can sit with your teenage kids and I do that as a therapist now. I can sit with them, I can get the whole story in 10 minutes because it's just about creating that safety.
Creating safety in conversations like this is an intentional effort. Most people don't intuitively reach for an approach that is assertive, gentle, and patient like this is. But safety makes all the difference. And if you're a loved one facilitating that conversation, your safety matters too. You will need a community in order to process and manage the overpowering emotions that come up when you're dealing with this. It's not just about healing. It's also having an outlet for everything you want to say that may not serve you when you're having those critical conversations. Disappointment, frustration, even desperation. These are normal emotions as a parent. They're valid. You can't avoid them, and you shouldn't pretend you don't have them. But you can set yourself up to succeed by giving yourself a way to process them on your time, not in front of your kids.
Any parent that's like, okay, I will choose to not be disappointed in my kids. I'm like, well, that's not real.
You're right.
No, right?
I know.
So I get to have that disappointment. That is my real human experience. I get to have all those emotions. But when we can open up about our emotions and really feel them, emotions have a shelf life. It's like burning a match. So when I talk to my buddies, or Kayla, and I get all of that emotion out, then when I'm sitting with my kid, I don't need it to come out on them.
That's the beauty of community.
That's the beauty of the community.
Of using that community in the right way.
So
and not stuffing it down.
Yes. And so I'm okay if you're super disappointed that you just found out that your 15-year-old is doing the shenanigans with the porn stuff or messing around with their boyfriend or girlfriend, or right, and sexually, blowing the boundaries away. You get to be disappointed, hurt, furious, all things. You just don't get to do it to them. But you have a right to have all those feelings. So get in your community and have them all. You get to have them all. And then you get to show up and be a parent. And so when you do that in community, it gets real easy to just show up with that Christ-like love.
When you lean on your community and find people to talk to, you're able to show up better as the person you want to be in those high-stakes interactions. Stephen had another tip for how to prepare for these kinds of conversations, something he says everyone should do before you think you need to. And it boils down to rooting out your own internalized shame about sexual behavior. Listen, I don't know how many people who look back on their sexual education growing up and think, wow, that was explained to me in a clear and age-appropriate way, and I was able to ask all the questions I needed. If that was you, I'm happy for you, pay it forward. But a lot of us associate conversations about sex or sexuality with the discomfort and awkwardness of the people who tried to talk to us about it all those years ago, if they ever did. The only way to get over that learned discomfort is to talk more. And that might mean a conversation with your OBGYN, using real names and terminology for body parts instead of euphemisms. It might look like sharing your sexual history with a partner or close friend so that you can practice desensitizing yourself to that topic, confronting any repressed shame. Or it might look like relying on the wealth of available resources for age-appropriate conversations with kids that positively and appropriately frame sexuality. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, not in this decade. Find a book that says what you want to say and read it together. You've basically got a script.
Get comfortable with your own sexuality and do your own work. Then helping your kids is a cakewalk. So, how comfortable are you? Are you looking at porn? I can't tell you how many dads I've talked to who are looking at porn and moms I've talked to who are doing the romance novel scene. And I'm like, right, so you talk about it and clean that up. You deal with your own shame. You will then be the expert that God called to teach your children. EducateAndEmpowerKids.org is a great platform that does a lot. They write some books and stuff, sectioned them in age appropriate, how to talk about sex. So that's a good one. You can go to unashamedandafraid.com/resources. We have a bunch of stuff listed there of different things you can do. But the more I'm not ashamed about it, the more open I can talk about it, the more that we do our own shame work, those conversations come very natural. And that's why I would say share your sexual history with a good friend, with your partner. That's your warm-up. That's how you're going to get comfortable saying the words, right? Talking about the body parts, saying porn, right? Saying masturbation, like do it practice round in your community. Like, hey, let me share and talk about that. So your first dry run is not sitting in front of your teenager trying to talk about it. Because by the way, if you don't think they realize that you're ashamed and afraid to have this conversation, they are. And if you show up that way, right? So I just had a 14-year-old kid who saw soft porn once and the parents like, help us talk to him. I'm like, dude, what's up? You into girls? And he's like, I don't know, kind of. I'm like, you ever hold hands with one? He's like, no. I'm like, you go to boy-girl parties? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, let's go, bro. Because that would be age-appropriate sexual experiences for him. So I'm going to encourage that. Yes, I want healthy sexual. I hope he holds hands with some girls. I hope he goes to some boy-girls party. So the more comfortable I get with it in my shame, you don't need me or the Lisa show to tell you what to do. You'll know. You're the right parent for the job. God put you there for a reason.
God put you there for a reason. And here's the best part. For parents who may be listening to this and thinking, oh no, I've done it all wrong, or it's too late, there's already a bunch of shame in my house, or I've already blown it, I went full investigator mode, and now my kids will never be honest with me, Stephen has some very clear advice.
Yeah, well, first off, if you're thinking that you've done it wrong, I'm just going to be that guy to unashamedly tell you, of course you've done it wrong. You've blown it. Come on.
I know, right?
You've blown it with your kids. I've already blown
gosh,
it.
so
And I
many
know.
times.
I'm like
so many times.
I'm like I have the knowing. My kids are 10. I should have already this. Of course
I'm not like a regular
it.
mom. I'm a cool mom.
I'm
and
a
I
cool
blew
mom
it.
and I blow it. No, so one, you're going to blow it. And what I would tell anyone
so true.
is it's not about the rip. It's about the repair.
I love that.
You can make repair. So whatever you've done, just like that's one of my favorite stories about is the prodigal son. The repair is always possible. The walk back is possible. So whether it's a parent or I've been a spouse, just own it. Get your shame out of the way. Get with God and his atonement and grace, and then just own it. Hey, I think I yell at you all the time, kids, and that's super messed up. I'm really sorry about that, and I'm going to work on changing that. And that level of vulnerability is going to actually be the factor that helps you change it. And so you have screwed it up. So if you're in the guilt or the shame right now of like, shoot, I'm listening to the podcast, I've done it wrong. P.S. So have we all. And you have time to make repair. There's always time to make repair. God's eternal. So even with people who aren't in this life anymore, you can still make repair.
I love how hopeful that is because at my stage of parenting, I have 5 kids. I have 1 at home. The rest of them are baby adults. Mm-hmm. They're on their own. And it's like now I look and go, oh, wait, okay. Everybody come back home. We're going to start over. Now I have a plan.
Yeah. And
now I'm going to raise
yes.
you. You know, and it's the big joke, right? Like with moms my age, we look at each other like, well, what did you do wrong? Well, I did. I
Right.
tried my hardest. I don't know. What did you
No,
like?
yeah.
And so we have that feeling of like that we still want to do over, but it's the repair, right?
Right,
It's
but-
not- it's
and
the
that's where-
not that you can't. No one can do over.
Well, but I would say you do get to do the do-over. Because, yeah, there's a lot of moms just like you at 25 that are sitting there going like, gosh, I can't do this. You get to do it over. When you're like, man, I really should have spent quality time with my kid in their hobby. Go do it.
You can do it
You're
now.
right.
Yeah.
It is not a junior high soccer game anymore, but it's still a thing. So go and do that. Oh, yeah, I'm just running some marathon. You are? Where?
I'll be there.
I'm going to be there. How can I be on your support
Yeah.
crew? How can I do, hey, we never had a conversation about sex. I just want to have a conversation about sex now. This is what I wish I would have said to you when you were a kid.
Yeah, and I'm
You
sorry
should have
I
had
made
this.
it so weird.
And I'm sorry I made it so weird. And I'm sorry this happened. This is, if I could have a do-over, this is I wish as a kid I would have told you this, and this about sex. And I'm sorry that I didn't.
That's
You
so
will break
empowering.
your children in a good way. Like the healing will, like the emotion will
never
come
see it
in.
coming. I love
They'll
that.
never see it coming.
Kids' family dinner is going to be different Sunday night.
Let's go.
I've thought a lot about this conversation with Steven since we sat down together. This was a big topic. And just like you can't resolve compulsive sexual behavior with a single conversation, 2 podcast episodes are not going to tell you everything you need to know. But there's something for everyone here, and it takes everyone working together to make this better. All of us can talk about it like it's in the room, because it is. When you're in a supporting role in someone else's recovery, you can protect your emotional and physical health by creating the safety you need, even if you're not ready to confront everything just yet. As you start those conversations, you can avoid investigator mode, knowing that you don't have to do this in one sitting. You can say, this is what I know, or this is what I need, and we'll talk about this and figure it out. It doesn't have to be right now. And when you're feeling overwhelmed or overcome by feelings of disappointment, anger, or hurt, naming those feelings and sharing with your community will be the lifeline that allows you to show up the way you want to in those critical interactions. If anything, I hope you know that you're not alone. This is the golden age for resources, for recovery and healing, for having age-appropriate conversations with kids, and for helping everyone to have a healthy relationship to their sexuality. In today's hypersexualized world, where you can't magically prevent exposure, one of the most powerful things you can do to prevent addiction is to root out shame and discomfort. Do your own work and start these conversations before you think you need them. Let me echo one more thing Steven said to parents. You are the right person for the job, struggles included. It's never too late. You're the expert God called for these kids, and you've got it.